All right, all right, all right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to week 4 with Deborah Wright. How are you doing, Deborah?
I'm really happy to see you, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Weekend was good. It was nice. It's always short, of course, but it's always a pleasure to be here. So welcome back. And yeah, so we have a few things to cover. We have a lot of stuff we actually want to cover. And so I'm not going to keep Deborah just waiting patiently here. So let's go through some of the stuff that we want to cover real fast. And of course, to just let you know where all the awesome content is. So we have Maxon 1, where all the Maxon needs are for all your artistry and all that good jazz. Do all the things that you want to do, create art. You have all the different tools at your disposal, so just Maxon Net. Of course, we also have a ton of events like this one where we're doing DBP. So we are doing Demystifying a series, and Deborah's here to hang out with us and talk about what she had done with the Lady Gaga tree, stuff like that. We also have Maxon Color, and then we have VFX and Chill. So great series coming through. Also ZBrush. If you're going to be at ZBrush, say hi. I'm going to be there. SIGGRAPH's going to be cool. Deborah, are you going to be at SIGGRAPH?
I can't, not this year, but I love SIGGRAPH. There's all the fun things there. I love it.
Okay, so we're going to take a lot of photos and make sure that you get photos so then you know. But, however, just mentioning SIGGRAPH anyway, because I'm going to be at SIGGRAPH August 10th. You will be at a special Ask the Trainer coming up August 10th. So if you've enjoyed what Deborah has shown so far, August 10th. Book it in your calendar. So come over and do events. And then we have Cineversity, where if you want to learn anything about our tools, how to use them, how to get started, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we have a Getting Started series. So Redshift, Cinema, ZBrush, Universe, Track Code, all that stuff. Definitely come on by to the event, to the learning page over at Cineversity. Also, Cineversity is really great because it also points to other additional content. So when you're logged in, you can see other content there. So definitely browse around all the different tutorials, product series, disciplines, etc. And then because you guys are all so awesome and everyone is hanging out with us all the time and you're secretly Maxon Pokemon trainers, got to catch them all. Here is the link, of course, in the chat to have a free t-shirt. All you have to do is pay for shipping. So thank you guys for being here. It's super important. We also have the ZBrush Summit. The ZBrush Summit is coming, and it is going to be here. It's going to be super awesome. It's going to be in person. We have the ZBrush Sculpt Off we're going to be announcing soon, which happens every year. It's also our 10th anniversary. So if you have never been to a ZBrush Summit and you're in LA, you're definitely going to want to stop by and check that out. You will also want to know that we can do stuff online. So if you can't make it, there's plenty of stuff to do online, so do not worry. And then, of course, Deborah wanted to point out something really, really cool is that in today's stuff, she's going to be showcasing some special brushes. More specifically, ZBrush Guide, Pablo Munez brushes. So there's a ton of brushes. We're going to drop some links into the chat right now. But more specifically, she's working with the digital clay pack. So if you want to check this out, it's a really great brush kit. I own it myself. And I actually love a lot of Pablo brushes. He also has a lot of free ones too. So if you just come to his site, go to Sculpting Brushes, and you want to try out what his brushes are even, he has a lot of free ones that are super amazing. So you'll want to definitely check these out. And then last but definitely not least, we have your website. And you're also on Instagram, and you're also on LinkedIn and stuff like that. So definitely come check out Deborah's work if you haven't already. And that's about it. I think I'm just going to toss it over to you. But I also want to actually, while we're getting ready to toss it over to you too, if you are going to stay the whole time, then I might just possibly show you some Redshift ZBrush techniques and how to get a render like this. Because Deborah and I were working over the weekends talking about how to showcase it. And she had mentioned last week that she was like, hey, can you do a quick render? And this is a Redshift render inside of ZBrush. So we'll be covering that as well at the end. So if you stay, hint, hint, you're going to be getting some knowledge drops. That being said, can I hand it over to you, Deborah?
I would love to talk about Redshift more. I'm so excited that you're willing to do this. And what's really, really fun for me is that I'm going to probably push the button and render in ZBrush, just standard ZBrush rendering package, so that we can see how juicy Redshift really can just like pump up the volume. On your screen, though, I also wanted to show off a little more of the work that I've done for stage and screen. And some of you might recognize this stage. This is from Earth to Ned, Disney Plus. I did this a couple of years ago for the nice people at, I just blanked on their name. It'll come back to me. But as you can see, I had an opportunity to create a lot of assets that were created in real life. I mean, there's a little desk right there. There's our hallway, and here's the columns, the lit columns, and the backdrop screens. All those things are developed using ZBrush, and it's been just a pleasure to be able to, pardon me, to work with these clients that I've worked with as a practical sculptor over the years and now transition into a digital modeler. And that's part of the magic of
Yeah, absolutely.
the field for me. Sorry, I was thinking and pushing buttons at the same time.
No, you were good. You were good. All right.
So we started this whole project out way back about a couple months ago, talking about what it is to deconstruct a brief. And a lot of people who are just coming into being freelancers or working in a company, a brief essentially is the assignment. And our assignment started out, let's see what we've got here. Let's see if I've got all of my, I do have all of my tools here. Let me open this up, and we're going to take a look. This is just with regular ZBrush rendering. There's just nothing special here. Our initial and first goal was to get to a tree like this, and we had a little drawing, and we followed the drawing from the client, but the client decided they wanted to change their direction, and this is what we ended up with pretty much last week. With this, it's adequate for us to show our client the direction that they asked us to go in. We've achieved the direction that they wanted us to go in that we incorporated the assets of the doorway and the lamp, but there's a lot of little delicate things that have not been dealt with, like awkward transitions right here for the where the wood is not looking good. It's looking kind of plasticky and awful. And we've got ugly transitions here too. And since this might be a little collectible, we want to make sure that all of these edges, all of these surfaces are looked at and cared for. Now, I won't be using our friend Pablo's all of his brushes today. The brush that I will be using, though, let me go into my light box, open up my brushes, and we'll open up the clay brushes. We have many to choose from, but the one that I'm using today is going to be our little rake alternative. I like that because we've got it's got a variety of textures within the alpha itself, and that's going to help me immensely tie in these textures. Let's take a look and see how that looks the opposite way. Now, something that our friend Ian taught me the very first day was using Preview AO. That has made a huge difference in my sculpting just in the month that I've been using it, Ian. I really love it. I really love the way that it has created a beautiful, just enough AO for me to see what I'm doing and not guess awesome all the time.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad that's been super helpful. When that feature came out, that changed my workflow too.
Yeah, I think the thing that has inspired me the most in working with this Demystify series with you is the challenge of stepping up my game and exploring places that I don't normally go. And you've really, really challenged me. And I'm so grateful for it, because I don't grow unless I hit that uncomfortable spot of wanting something that I don't have, a skill or a technique. All those things make me a better artist, especially when other artists who I admire give me a little bit of a challenge. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the kind words. That's awesome.
You know, it's not easy to admit one's at first it's not easy to admit one's failings or lack, but truly I've never really found myself being shamed by a teacher or anybody of any consequence when I admit I don't know. That right there is, it's powerful when you admit you don't know and you want to know. I'm going to shift over to move. And,
exactly. We did get a first question in, and
yes.
just wanted to ask you real fast. Do you use a mouse or a pen tablet? And which tablet do you use if you use a pen tablet?
I use both. Wow, that didn't work out nicely. Crash! Wow. Okay, I use a Huion, Huion 32-inch screen, not tablet, but well, I forget what's that called. Ian, what are they called?
Wait, the Cintiq. Wait,
it's like a Cintiq. There's a technical term. Anyway, yes, that's what I work on. It's 32 inches. It's just the right size. Anything bigger than that for me on my desk and my work style just seems a little excessive. I switch over to my mouse on occasion, but mostly for doing naming conventions, which I really wanted to talk about a little bit today. You know, for those who are coming to this game and you're brand new and you're starting to explore working with other people, I'd like to make sure that you understand that you need to name your tools, name all of the things that you're working on, and keep within the convention of your group. If you've noticed over here on the side, I've named these things: stump, door, lantern, demystify tree, the fibers, and then the pedestal. Probably spelled pedestal wrong, but that's not the point. The point is that they're labeled and they're named. Even if your spelling is Drek, it's important to get those names on there, because when you pass off your tool, like I passed it off to Ian, he needs to know when I refer to something, he needs to know what that I'm referring to. And, you got to keep your conventions consistent. So when you're working with a group, make sure that you follow what has been established by the group. And, it's tempting to want to buck the system or try to, teach them your way. But oftentimes those kind of naming conventions and filing conventions are, established after years and years of experience. So make sure that, first of all, you name your stuff and you keep your files tidy and clean. And that way you can pass them along to your partners in the future effortlessly.
Is this the part where I tell you I named the tree final _ Redshift final version 3 final?
All the finals. Because it is final.
Yeah, it is final.
Finally, it's final.
Yeah. That is always such a good tip, is naming and stuff like that. Because that's super important. I preach it all the time, and I also break the rule all the time too. So even I yell at myself. I'm like, why did you not name it?
I yell at myself when I realize I can't find the thing that I'm looking for. Like last week, I did something. I think I saved something, and then it immediately evaporated because I didn't remember where I saved it, and I probably saved it as the same name as something else. And that frustrates me, and I can only imagine how much it's going to frustrate my art director when they go to look for that thing that the client is looking for and they can't get their hands to it immediately. So what am I doing? I am right now getting rid of, well, not getting rid of, I'm masking out the end of my tree stump because I would like very, very much for it to have a separate texture or unique texture from my tree stump itself. And the reason being is that I am going to open up right now. I'm going to open up, going to go on over here to surface. And I'm not a huge noisemaker user. It's not one of my superpowers, but I wanted to show how it can be used in a way that really augments and also helps create more of a natural feeling on your organic item, be it a tree or whatever. I am going to open my light box. Actually, let's open up the light box and we're going to go into noise. The noise that, believe it or not, that looks really awesome on this tree is number 40, pink and gray. And I know it looks weird, but it looks pretty darn awesome once you manipulate it a little bit. So let me, let's open this up.
I love surface noise. I think it's one of those features that I can't get enough of.
I don't use it enough. I really just do not. And it's only because I don't think about it. And the reason I don't think about it and this is the negativity of being a traditional sculptor, is that you do everything by hand. And when I start thinking about all the other things that I have available to me, it makes my work infinitely easier. And okay, so there, I'm getting a little bit closer to what I wanted here. This noise is not going to follow exactly the flow of the tree, but it's going to, there we go. It's going to give a little more of a natural feeling to our tree once I apply it. Let's see, apply it to my mesh. And then I'm also going to fill with color. Let's see what we got here.
While you do that,
Yes,
we did get a question come in, and also we got a question that came in, but we also I was having a side chat with FFR95 talking about showcasing a pizza box folder trick on how to combine your items really quickly. So I'm going to show that towards the end of the stream as well. But the question for you, Deborah, was any tips for an aspiring artist that wants to get into sculpting for stage and screen?
So let me ask you a question first before I answer that question. What I would like to know is, what part of stage and screen do you want to be part of?
Oh, that's a good one. Is there a reason why you have that question in mind?
Yes, there is definitely a reason behind that, because Lady Gaga was a project that was for a musical artist. And the reasons that it was attractive to me were the complications of making a thing that needed to be pulled all apart, a very delicate thing with lots of branches and, in bits and pieces, and it needed to be pulled apart, put in boxes, and shipped around the world. That was fun for me. That may not be fun for you. Are you interested in doing great big, huge backdrops for Broadway stage productions? Do you want to work exclusively in television? Do you want to make props, things that people hold? ask yourself that question. What is it that really gets you excited about working in stage and screen? Big things, little things, things that move, I don't know. Kinetic sculptures, they're all there. They're all available to you. And that's why I asked the question back. I wanted to, see if we could clarify that a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll look for the answer. In the meantime, what are you currently finessing here?
So I'm going back in and I'm having a little bit of fun with that brush from Pablo again. And I am mucking about and creating the striations or the strata so that when I hit BPR, we got a little bit of differentiation of our texture of our tree. I'm not satisfied with that though. So what I want to do is, even though it's cute and it looks pretty darn close to what I want, I'm going to take it one step further because I can, and I will.
That's always a good mindset. I'm going to take it further because, well, I can.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to get to that. Oh gosh, I had a mentor one time tell me, right? And I love the way that John Lincoln spoke. He always called everybody by their last name. It was equal opportunity in that regard. He goes, right? You got to take it from the last 90% all the way through. And he was absolutely right. I really, I would quit. And this is when I was in school. So, I would quit thinking I was done. And he was always like, no, you got to push it to the point where you feel like you've really explored all the edges that you need to explore. And I thought that was brilliant advice, years down the line. Okie dokie.
Yeah.
So I've got the end of my tree. And if you've ever looked at the end of a tree carefully, that has gotten old and it's been cut off. And, as things decay and move along, they tend to recede into themselves a little bit. Now, it's just a little tiny thing. It's a little itty bitty detail. But when you are working in collectibles or toys or something where people are really aware of those sensitivities, you really want to take that and really run with it, because you're gonna impress your people. You're going to impress the people that you want to impress, which are your end users, the people who are going out and buying the thing. It's important to impress your director and your designer as well, because that's how you get more work as a freelancer. But it's also really important to remember, who are you sculpting this for? You're not sculpting it exclusively just for the director and designer. You're really sculpting it for those little kids or those collectors who love the product, the work, the property who you're working for. So keep your end user in mind at all times as best you can. And I need to.
Yeah, no, that's super great advice. We actually had a comment. I wasn't quite sure if it was a question, but I'll treat it as a question. When they said that I've seen people do entire texturing in ZBrush and it looks amazing with no need for substance paper. However, it depends on the model and the sort of texturing. I would say, yeah, it depends for sure. As somebody who myself worked in toys primarily, and I've done game assets, but when working with toys, sometimes I would go into Substance Painter, but I would want all my sculptural detail inside of ZBrush because it's just easier ultimately to then produce that via 3D printing, to go then into cast and mold or just straight into injection mold. It's just a lot easier to keep all your details that way. However, there is a way to take details like height and displacement map information from Substance, bring it back into ZBrush, and then move that into actual geometry as well, with again, with displacement map projection. So there is a way to do that for sure. But yeah, I would say it's just ultimately easier because ZBrush is a sculpting program to just stay inside and sculpt. And
this is one of the things that, I can speak about, I spoke earlier about my failings. And this is actually not so much a failing, but it's not an area that I have expertise in, which is that flow between substance and sculpting, moving that mind shift back and forth. It's something that I'm developing. But again, my strength is as a sculptor. I can make the thing and I know how to make the thing. I trust people like Ian to come in and make the thing shine with rendering and all that magical stuff that he and Ellie do, because that's the kind of stuff that I know that they've got superior skills there and I'm still learning. So being able to step back from that is also really, a gift to myself. I don't set myself up for failure. So
100%. Super great advice. Yeah, always set yourself up for success. And then to follow up, going back to the original question about stage and screen,
yes.
They said, Cecilia is their name. They said, wow, great, good question. I'm more interested in creating props that can be held in backdrops for films, as an example. Not so much for Lady Gaga, where it needs to be transported everywhere.
Okay, that really helps me. That helps me answer your question. Let me say what I'm doing right now so everybody can just follow along as I talk about my answer to you. Right now, I've taken an alpha, that's a bark alpha, and I have taken it into my my standard brush with a drag rectangle, and now I am unifying all that stuff. All those really awkward bits and pieces that just don't quite work for me. Like that's really just, no, we're going to make that look more like a tree by bringing in a little bit more. Let's see, what do I got here? I think my intensity is a little too high, but I'm happy my RBG is high. By using this texture, it marries so much sweeter, and you can be judicious about it too. Like, leaving this little area untouched, but touching the areas above. This is why I tend to move a little slower than a lot of artists, because I really do enjoy the process of touching my sculpts and being directly involved with their the one by one placement. And everybody's got their own style, everybody's got their own way. And this is what I did for Gaga. I literally sat and I touched every freaking surface, made sure that each one was as unique and juicy as it deserved to be. And when you look at the final results, which, they really wanted a tortured tree that looked like it had been scarred and abused, and it's there. It really, truly is there. And and as I'm growing more tree aware on my walks, I see the patterns that are in our trees and how I can emulate that with my own techniques. So let's zoom out. So to answer your question, I would start by, especially if you want to be making props, you're not going to be looking more like being part of a special effects team. Props are usually done by special effects or a prop shop. That's a good place to start. You want to be part of that team that creates the thing for your actor or actress to hold. You're going to be working. I use the metric of, if it's smaller than a human, it's a prop. If it's bigger than a human, it is it's a set piece. So I've always enjoyed doing smaller pieces because I like the intimacy. Though I have done a lot more large pieces as a sculptor because that's what was called for at the time. And you got to make a living. But my best advice to you is to get yourself into a prop shop. And if you are in college, I would highly recommend volunteering your service as a digital artist and align yourself with a print shop like a makerspace where you can actually have something like a lightsaber or a sword hilt that you've created and walk in to your local theater, your community theater, whatever it is, and walk in and say, I can make this for you. And if it's in your budget, you just pay for the printing. That way you can actually have some physical assets that you can not only have, for your own satisfaction, but when you go in for that first interview, you can pull it out of your valise and say, and look, I made one. That right there, that's proof. That's proof that you can make a thing that works, that's scaled to human proportion. And if you paint it, even better. So I hope that answers your question. And if you have more questions, and you think about them later on, join me on the 10th, and I will be just thrilled to talk more about this with you. So thank you for the question.
Absolutely. I actually just dropped a ZBrush how to make a lightsaber tutorial that I did a little while ago.
Perfect.
So if you want to know how to make a lightsaber in ZBrush, just going to drop that down in there. Go check that out. It was a live stream, so you can easily follow along with it. And you can see what's happening there too. And then, yeah, I would say I'm just going to double down on the 3D printing aspect of stuff. If you can get into 3D printing and work from digital to real world, then I think too that's going to be helpful. Like Deborah said, bringing something in and being like, look, I made this, and that's going to be super helpful. So.
Yeah, proving that you can actually make the thing and the thing can get printed and it's not a train wreck, and you know how to generate files that are ready to be printed. That's really good. I don't know if you noticed, but we're getting close to the end of this little adventure, and I'm now in the part that I really love, but I don't spend a lot of time doing, which is poly painting.
Oh, it's amazing.
Oh, I love poly painting, but I'm usually moving so fast to get my client's thing out the door that I don't indulge it enough. So coming in and being able to spruce this little baby up and add some rings that are going to make it more believable and read more realistic, even though it's a stylized piece. I mean, God knows this is not as realistic as I would like it to be. It still reads more natural. Get some paint on it.
Do you ever find yourself when you're working with clients where you haven't, like, you're not super in love with it, but at the same time, you want to respect your client's wishes? So is there anything that you do to kind of help inspire you to kind of just, align yourself with your client's vision?
Okay, so this is a really good question. And I'm super happy that you asked this because every single artist who does this for a living or does any art for a living is going to run up against what's I've heard David Igo call the Valley of the Suck. And it's either you're having a hard time getting through your project, or you've got a project you don't like that you naturally would not really be excited about sculpting, but you got to pay the rent. That's when you remember why you chose to do this as a living, is that it beats the heck out of digging ditches. Now, don't get me wrong, digging ditches is important. But if you don't want to do something you don't want to do to make a living, and you'd rather do something that satisfies your soul, then sometimes you have to do things that are unattractive, like taking the time to do naming conventions or remembering where to put your files. Those little teeny tiny itty bitty things make a difference, and get you through the day. And also, honestly, even when I'm doing my own work, there are parts of the day where I just go, oh God, I hate this project. And that's when I get up off my tuchus and I drag myself down to the park and I go look at the bushes, or I stare at the sky, or I call a friend and I get myself a cup of tea, or whatever your beverage of choice is, and get away from your project. Just stand up and walk away. Maybe just get a glass of water and go pet the dog. Sometimes standing and getting away from your project for a couple hours, coming back to it, reinvigorates you. There is a lot of application of derriere to chair and just keeping it there, because a lot of work is very, very glamorous and, doesn't, really get your juices flowing. There's a lot of drudgery in the work, like this. I mean, a lot of people may not find it attractive to sit down with their standard brush and their bark alpha and sit here and noodle the hell out of, excuse my language, to noodle like this. A lot of people don't find that attractive. I happen to like it.
Yeah.
So
That actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go.
I was going to say that actually leads into another question that I actually have a lot to say, but you're kind of already touching on the topic. So I just kind of want to just like slightly interrupt. Sorry. But somebody said, sorry, ridiculous question, which it's not. There's no such thing as ridiculous question here. Why would you polypaint instead of matte cap or super quick and dirty texturing in Photoshop, Cinema 4D, etc.? And I feel like you're already kind of touching on this a little bit, so I wanted to give you first crack before I expand.
It's not my style, and I am not a Cinema 4D expert. My style is, I'm painting primarily because it gives me pleasure. There is no other reason for this particular brief for me to be painting. There is no, this is, if this were a real project that I was going to be sending off, this would go just like this. This is how it would look. I would not have there'd be no paint on this thing at all. I mean, there'd be nothing. That's how it would look. It would just be plain, because that's what they hired me to do, was to sculpt the thing. But because I'm feeling frisky, and because I rarely get an opportunity to paint and do a paint master, because this is essentially what I'm doing, is I'm establishing the style, the paint style for this piece by painting it like this. I'm showing my designer, this is what I would intend it to look like if I were in charge of doing paint masters. I don't usually get that privilege. That's usually somebody else who comes in and makes that decision and might use Cinema 4D or the other techniques and methods that you were talking about. And you say down and dirty and fast. I'm clearly not doing this because I want to be fast. I'm doing this because I enjoy it. Does that make sense?
No, that's such a great response. Sorry, you're going to get the Ian answer too. I too have an answer, which is it really also depends on you, the artist, and what you're more comfortable with. So, for example, if you're new to ZBrush and you're watching Deborah or myself do ZBrush, then what you're really looking at is the fact that we spent the majority of our time there. I would absolutely implore you that if you weren't sure how to polypaint, and especially if you're working on a client, don't just learn polypainting on that job. like you know, stick with what is you're comfortable with. So if you are comfortable with ZBrush to Go Z to Cinema 4D, then do some quick texturing and get some material slapped on there to get quick color, because that's what you know, then definitely lean into that workflow, because that's going to get you finished with the job quicker. However, at the same time, ZBrush was designed as a painting program that turned to a sculpting program. And so what's really neat about ZBrush is that the vertex color that you can utilize can be used in a final render, and that does get supported in the GoZ application in this, let's say, Cinema 4D. So you can spend more time if you know, if you're comfortable painting, to just go in and paint. There's also a ton of tricks to get paint laid down super fast. So then I can, like, you know, if I really needed to polypaint this tree for a client, I could do it in like 5 minutes. It would not be like the best paint job, but it could be close enough, because color helps people, you know, actually see the end goal. When I was a black and white 2D artist back in high school, my teachers hated the fact that I wouldn't try color, because I really loved grayscale. However, when I leaned into color, more people connected with my work. So showcasing color and staying within the application that you're comfortable with is a great way to boost a project and make it pop a little bit more. So there's a lot of different techniques and stuff, but I would say it's really important to lean into your strengths first and foremost, but also to try something new. And then don't be afraid to be like, oh, hey, you know, I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to paint this, because, again, that could be repurposed. I can use this vertex color. I can create a map in ZBrush and throw it in the Substance Painter and the Cinema, etc. So there's the training Ian answer for you. There's a lot of purposes. So it's also not a quote waste of time either, because it can be reused. And like Deborah said too, you know, this could be their master. So let's say she tosses it off to the client and says, here you go, here's the tree, here's the project, what do you think? They're like, great, can we see it in color? Well, if she just provided a color option out the gate, they could be like, oh, hey, cool, that's kind of, and that gives them an idea. But if they wanted to see the grayscale version, then they wanted to see the color version, you kind of already did that. So it's just a great way to, like, just kind of make something pop, bring something to life, but also to show it off in different ways. So there's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I also want to layer on top of everything you've just said, Ian, because we're talking about a brief, we're talking about making a living doing this thing that we do. Not only showing that you can sculpt the thing and meet their desires and their needs, but to also be able to go, oh, and by the way, here's a little color render, you know, and now Ian's going to take it to another level and he's going to light it. To be able to take it to that place for your client makes you that much more valuable to them, because they're going to think on you next time and say, oh, not only can they sculpt the thing, but they also give us these great pictures that we can send off to our factory and use that as a direction for our paint masters. It makes you more valuable. So learning all these new little bits and pieces and adding them to your toolbox is really, you know, that's the name of the game. Yep. Thank you so much for that compliment. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm enjoying this tree. I think now it's finally met its place. I think it's at a point now where I can let it live and breathe and be what it is. I want to go over a couple more things before I let go and push this into Ian's hands so that he can make it light up and be pretty. I want to talk about, well, we just did talk about money in a in an outside way, but I also want to talk about invoicing. The final phase, you've created the thing, your client is pleased as punch, and they say, good job, great working with you, hope to work with you again. Now that's your cue. The moment they say good job, and this is great, and the client gave you the buy off, and they're like, thumbs up, rock on, that's your cue. Drop your invoice and do it within 24 to 48 hours. Don't let it wait. Please don't, because Business moves fast. These people are busy on the other end of your computer. They're very busy meeting their goals. And you've got to get in there and be professional and get your client, your invoice as soon. Oh, thank you. Gazi D, thank you so much. That was very sweet of you. Just be professional and get that invoice in right on time. Say thank you for the project. Use your manners. People forget that when you send an invoice, it's not just going into some computer somewhere. It's actually going to somebody's desktop. They're going to look at it and you're going to say, thank you for this project. I enjoyed doing XYZ project. The part I liked, if you want to get more specific, was really doing this part. Because we're creating relationships here. It's not just making the thing and getting it out the door. It's creating a relationship. The people that I work with, like especially at Jet Sets and All Sets, that's how, thank you, I knew it would come back to me. I worked with Nick over at All Sets to create the Disney project, the Earth to Ned project I showed you earlier. Those guys are my friends now. I call them up just because I want to talk to them, just because I want to see how they're doing. How are they hanging in there during this, actor and writer strike? I'm concerned about them. They're my people. They understand me when I'm talking too, because if you're interested in getting into this field, it's extremely, extremely specified. And most people are going to look at you like this when you start talking, because they don't know what you're talking about. They don't understand what it means to be concerned about a draft so that you can pull a part out of a mold. They're not going to know what that is. At a cocktail party, you're going to be the most boring person because you won't be able to talk about what you're talking about. And if you do, it's going to leave most people just with Tweety birds and stars around their head. They're not going to know what you're talking about. So remember that you're creating a relationship with your client, and it's nice to add those little notes to your invoice and be relatable, because it's changed in the years as we've moved into a more hybrid relationship where you and I have a relationship here and now in this space. I don't know you, but you are now getting to know me. And hopefully we'll get to know each other better as we go along. And you have to make an effort. It's really what I'm trying to boil it down to. Oh, and by the way, for your information, I'm going to be putting an invoice in my package that I'll be sending to Maxon so that you can take my invoice and look at how I've got it constructed. It's just a simple PDF. And I invite you to use that if you do not have your own invoice built. So I've built you a little invoice. It's the one I use. It's very simple. It's not rocket science, but I wanted to give you another little gift to say thank you so much for hanging in here the whole time. 4 sessions, people. You did it. And I'm very, very grateful for this. Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been amazing to have you on here. It's been really cool. So we are now, are we going to be moving into rendering right now?
I am so excited to see what you're going to do. It's like, okay. Show me.
Okay, perfect. So real quick, let me go ahead and switch on over to my screen. And you can see here, actually, it's doing a little bit of a, it's called a render region. So we're utilizing Redshift, and I was just doing a little bit of tests on the side while we were coming through. Now we are streaming. So of course, streaming and rendering, that's always going to be a fun little thing to put.
It's never a successful pairing.
Yeah. Well, but that leads me into the first spot, which is, and this is a big tip for rendering in Redshift via ZBrush, is that if you come up here to render and we just dock that on the left-hand side, we actually have what is called an error threshold slider and a quality slider. So you can actually drop the quality down a little bit and increase that error threshold to, let's say, like between 0.3 to 0.4. And what that will do is that will help speed up your render time a bit. Now, of course, I have glass and reflective metal right here. So to do a render region, I'm going to hit Control R, just kind of explaining like a little bit of like how to like speed up your render time just a little bit to help you kind of get through and see the different iterations. So let me see real quick, just see what this looks like. Should just take a second, and then I'm gonna showcase the setup. Rendering in Redshift ZBrush is actually quite fun. It's quite easy and it's relatively fast, especially if you're not streaming at the same time while you're rendering. That's always like a big one. But every time you do a Redshift render in ZBrush, the first time you send a Redshift render, it needs to handshake. So Redshift is in the background and it is handshaking with ZBrush saying, yep, that's a thing. And so if you change a material, if you change your model's position, or if you change your lighting setup, it will take a little bit of time to send that off, but then it gets faster and faster. So if you're not familiar with Redshift, it is the it is the render engine of Maxon, and it is right up there with Keyshot and Cycles, Eevee, Octane, Arnold. It's right up there. It's just a little bit different. It is based as a realistic render engine. So that being said, let's go ahead and look at some of the basic settings, how to get that started up in there. So first things first is you do have to have it installed. So if you go to the Maxon app, you have to have it installed. Now, if you do have a ZBrush subscription, meaning you only have ZBrush, you do have Redshift CPU installed as well. So, but it's right here under the Maxon One app. You'll want to make sure that's installed. So if you're following along and you're like, this isn't working for me, or you are coming here and trying to turn this button, and then you have a warning that pops up, that's all that's happening, is that it's saying that's not installed. You have to go install that. So, and that's how you activate Redshift versus BPR. If I wanted to do a BPR render, so again, under render, we have this menu called Redshift Render. If it's turned off and I just do a render, it's just going to do a standard BPR render. And so you can see here, that's the BPR render in itself. Now, we do have some new materials in ZBrush. So we have Redshift PolyPaint materials, which is materials in which you can go ahead and actually, it supports PolyPaint. So if you spent the time like Deborah did to paint the actual tree, and now you want to use that color in your render, we have materials that support PolyPaint. And then we have preset colors. So if I wanted this tree, somebody says, hey, this tree actually needs to be kind of a jade material, then or iron material. I actually have all these materials down here, and I could just click this. And if I click, let's say jade, and I say, okay, right? And I come through here. Now, actually, let's pick a different material. Let's pick something a little bit more extreme, like gold. And then I apply that material. So I'm just going to apply just the material. The PolyPaint information is still there. However, it's just what it is just kind of, it is just hiding that PolyPaint. And the way we could tell that is if you grab the material and just pick anywhere in the empty canvas, it's going to just pick flat, like just flat color, which is a standard ZBrush color. And that's how you reset materials in ZBrush. So if I say fill on the material, now if I pick and hover over any of the other materials, you'll actually see here that I can change it really quickly. Yeah, skip this note. And so you can see here, it's just, the PolyPaint is still there. It's just blocking it out. And that's just the setting under material modifiers. Down at the bottom, there's a use material color. So I wanted to explain that real quick. And so now how do we like get this kind of scene set up here? So first things first, let's actually just pick a basic material. For this one, I actually built a vinyl material that ships with the ZBrush 2023. And so that's inside. And so that's what I use for a majority of my toys, or the majority of my basic renders, if I think they're going to be relatively not super realistic, but kind of like this, like a collectible. So I'll use my vinyl material. And then I want to bring in the light information. So I want to talk about lighting for just a second, which is most people in ZBrush will be familiar with this light setup here, where you have these different light options. You click one to turn it on or off, click another one to turn it on, and then you can adjust these different settings. But ZBrush also has, so if I turn on this main one, but turn this light way, way, way down, ZBrush also has HDRs that you can utilize that ship with it. So what I can actually do is, let's turn on Redshift Render. And then by default, it'll have this use default panorama light. But instead of using this, I actually want to have my own HDR. So I could do one of two things. I can come up to light and go to background. And then I can either click this texture and then come in here to import and go find a HDR. So I actually have, like, if I go to like documents, my HDRs. I have a bunch of HDRs and EXRs that I like to use. Or what you could do is open up the light box with the comma key, open that light box up, go up to texture, and then we're going to wait for it to just load because there's a ton of EXRs in here. Go to panoramas, and then here we actually have some HDR or EXR file types that we can use. And one of my favorite ones to use is actually all the way down here at the bottom right. I love this one. So you'll just come through and double click it, and that will open that up. And if I unlock my camera for a second and rotate, you can see here that the HDR is loaded. Now, if you see this instead, that's just because you have perspective turned off. So perspective turned off, it won't see the camera information, so you won't actually see the background. But that's okay if you just hit P on the keyboard or come over here and hit perspective, that's going to turn that on. And now what we can do is we can actually play with a bunch of settings. So you can see here I have a redshift exposure, which is going to expose just how the material sees the lighting. And then I have a normal exposure, which is the overall exposure. So I can turn this up or down. So depending on the HDR you want to use, if you want to use the background but not blow out your scene, you can drop the exposure and then increase the redshift exposure. Get something close to what you want. You can also blur this. And you can also use your longitude and latitude to rotate around and find a position that you would like. And once you find something that you would like, you can go ahead and just do a quick little render test. Again, hitting render region by hitting Control R, and that will do a base setup like this. So we're going to go ahead and let that go. I'm going to check to make sure I'm not missing any questions. So how does Redshift work with millions of polys? It depends on memory and RAM. So obviously, the better your computer is, the faster it's going to work, of course. So if you have a better GPU, the Redshift subscription is both CPU and GPU. So you'd actually optimize the render with your GPU with the subscription. If you're with just ZBrush subscription, meaning you only have ZBrush subscription, you have Redshift CPU, so then it will depend on the CPU that you have as well as the RAM. Now, what makes Redshift unique, and that's such a great question, is because I have actually rendered out about 90 million polys in ZBrush, not streaming, in a few minutes, and it was amazing. I want to emphasize that I want to emphasize the streaming part, because streaming takes up a lot of resources, which is why it's actually a little bit slower. I'm actually building a setup to help with this process a little bit more, having another computer just be my stream machine so I can do this. This is why you haven't seen a lot of Redshift tutorials from the ZBrush side on this side. I'm trying to build a nice machine to help showcase that, courtesy of Dell, which will be awesome.
Terrific. Good news.
So, and if you're doing a Redshift render and you want to hit escape, that's going to go ahead and cancel out your scene. And then you'll get something like that. You click anywhere and that kind of clears that spot. So that's the general, like, getting started with it. Now, the other thing I want to kind of call out here is, and somebody mentioned this question before, which is like grouping items, especially if you're trying to like add a bunch of materials to, so you have like 100 subtools and you're trying to actually render this out and you want to group things together so then it's easier to find, and then you can also group materials together a little bit easier. So what is really cool, and I'm just going to go ahead and come back here to light and just turn the on button off, which still has the HDR loaded, but it's just not showing it in the background. So it looks a lot like this. So what we can do to actually group stuff together is actually, let's take this lantern apart a little bit. So I have my main material here, and then I also have like some other attributes. So if I go ahead and split hidden, and then I have this guy here, and let's just say all this was different. I'm going to tear this apart. Deborah, don't mind me. So let's say, okay, let's just say that that's one item. That's perfectly fine. So let's say I wanted to group the door and the lantern together as one item. So what we could do is, notice they are separate items. So going back to that question, what we could do is what I call the pizza box trick, where I actually come in here and I turn on the gizmo and I hit this little it's called transpose all selected subtools. That's why we need the pizza box. That's a mouthful. So the pizza box. So you click this and you can see a lot of things just went to like this anti-aliasing look. So now what I could do is I can actually hit Control Shift and drag out and select these two items, select this, and what you'll want to notice is that the door and the lantern and the frame of the lantern, that's all separate subtools, but I have these selected, which means I could move these around if I chose to, right? Control Z to bring that back. Well, instead of like trying to just throw everything into a folder, all I need to do is hit Control F, and you're going to get this nice little pop-up, and that pop-up is going to say, hey, did you want to put everything into a folder? So again, Control F. Do you want to put all the visible subtools that you have selected in a folder? And I'm going to say, yes, that sounds great. And then it's going to let me go ahead and rename this. So we'll call this door lantern. And now if we look over here, my tree is outside of the folder and everything else is now inside of the folder because those are everything that I selected. So the candle, the flame, the tree light, the door, everything I had selected is now there. And then I can just turn off the selected all subtool, and then that gives me that. So then that's how you can group things. Now let's say I wanted everything to have the same exact material, and what you can actually do is under the tool menu, not the color, but under the tool, I can actually come in and say, let's go to not polygroups, let's go to PolyPaint. And then we're going to do fill color, but we're going to make sure material selected. So material selected. Then we're going to go ahead and say fill color. That fills the one object. But then I'm going to come in here, go up to subtool, and then in the folder, I'm going to press the cog wheel, and then I'm going to come all the way down to, all the way at the top to apply last action, and then say OK, and then everything gets applied with that material. That's also an undoable action. So if you're like, I don't like that, just Control Z and that undoes. So those are all the basic stuff that I wanted to get out of the way of that. So now with getting some of the lighting information. So there's a lot of information we could throw out, but to just basically kind of have something to get you started and get you into that mindset of rendering here, what I want to do is just come in and I want to turn on the lighting, and I want to adjust the latitude. Usually here I'll do something like this one, a little bit of a backlight, and I do want to bring the exposure up just a little bit. So I'm going to go 1.5, which is about where I had it, and then the redshift exposure about 1.2 should be okay with that. I'm also going to increase the threshold just a little bit more, just because I do want to speed it up for the render. If you want progressive rendering, you could just hit progressive rendering. And then what that will do is it won't do, you can't just sculpt and have progressive rendering turned on, but anytime I want to activate it, if I just hit Shift R or Control R, then that's going to go ahead and start that render. And I'm going to let that go for a little bit as well. Just kind of see how this goes. And this is why I'm actually building a computer for streaming.
Thank you so much about mentioning the progressive rendering tip. That helps a great deal.
Yeah, absolutely. We won't be going too much far over. I do want to show the final render, which I do have a render done for you. But again, we're going to be setting up to do this more often because the render is just taking forever during the stream, unfortunately. So I'm working on building a different machine for that. There is something I did wanted to cover real fast because I do want to show the final render. So let me show that real fast. Then there is a tip I wanted to showcase about that. So let me come here to my downloads. And this is the final render that we did. So let me move this over here and zoom in so you can kind of see what that looks like. So this is what the final render looked like. Now, what's really neat about this render is I actually used a little bit of a trick because Redshift, this is the first iteration of Redshift and ZBrush. And if we go here to our render, and then we go to our render passes, there is, at the moment, we don't have the ambient occlusion or the shadow passes at the moment. So, but we have everything else. We have depth and shaded and so forth. So what we can actually do, if we wanted to have this pop a little bit more in ZBrush, is we can actually come through and use BPR rendering. And this is my kind of little workaround for that, is that we can actually use the ambient occlusion from the BPR and move it into the Redshift. So I'm going to show you how to do that as well. And then we'll be wrapping it up. So here, what we need to do is first turn off Redshift render.
Okay.
And then we need to go to our render we need to go to our render properties, and we need to turn on ambient occlusion, which is right here. So having that, it's off by default, so we'll need to turn that on. And then we need to go down to our AO or BPR AO. And then I like to set, I don't touch any of these other sliders. I only touch this resolution slider, and I set that to 4000 because I think it looks nice. So definitely try that. And then the last thing is I go to shadow, BPR shadow, and I say, G strength about 0.7-ish at an angle of 35 and raise at 90. Those are my default. Everything else I don't touch, just those 3 sliders. And I think that's just gives me a really nice look. So if I were to now, let's come back up to light, and I'm just going to make sure that I turn off the background and I hit render. This is going to be a BPR render. And what this will do is this is going to give me my shadow pass. Now you're seeing a little bit of funkiness. That's because we're going ahead of ourselves, and I have all these other BPR filters turned on. So let's turn all of that off so you could just see what this is doing. So let me re-render. And now you can see here that this is giving me a little bit of a AO look to it. If I were to turn this off real fast, just so you could see the difference, if I were to turn this off, re-render, boop, you can see here just a little bit flatter. It just makes it pop just a little bit more. So with that on, what this is going to allow me to do is now under the render menu, I now have an AO pass. So I can click this, and then I can say, you know what, this is going to be, put this on my desktop, and we'll just call this my tree AO final. That's the one I like the most. And I'm going to go ahead and enter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate Redshift again. So I'm going to go up to the render menu. And so go to Redshift renderer. I'm going to turn that back on. And then if I do a render again, and let's actually try something. I'm just going to, for the sake of the stream, try to hide the lantern just a little bit, just to hopefully speed it up, because the reflection might be a little much for the stream. Yeah. And let me do a Redshift render. Now, when you turn off BPR render and when you switch back and forth between Redshift and BPR, you need to actually re-render, which will then handshake with Redshift. So let's give that a second.
So that was the question I had was, do we lose the handshake every time we switch back and forth between BPR and Redshift?
Yeah, it actually ends up disconnecting and then reconnecting that. That will happen if you move your model physically in space with like the gizmo, or if you end up turning around and turning it off and on again, then that will do that. I apologize. It is a little bit slower today. Again, the streaming is not. This wasn't the ideal setup. That's my fault. I do apologize for that.
There's no apology necessary. This is the pain and the struggle of doing rendering is the waiting.
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you what. This is what we're going to do. I have SIGGRAPH coming up. I'm going to be pushing a dedicated Redshift render because it's not liking me today. So okay. What I'm going to do is I am going to link to a Redshift tutorial that I did here a little while ago, but we'll do a more updated one because there are things that have changed. So let me just send a link for those who are patiently waiting and being like, yay, there it is. And then you can see how I've done a little bit of this. And then we'll do another one when I can get my streaming machine set up. That's going to be the thing. Dell sent us a really awesome computer for that. Because I'm like, I want to render live.
I wait to see it. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I want to render live. So hopefully that was at least helpful. Again, watch that tutorial as well. But this was the final render and what that ultimately looked like. And when I'm not streaming, it actually was quite fast. So, which is super nice. So,
isn't that the way it always works out, though, Ian?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I had this whole plan of like, look, this is going to be super cool. So we're gonna try this again in the near future. Believe you me. But yeah. Again, Deborah, thank you so much for being on here. Just wanted, hopefully I did your work a little bit justice because your work is just super beautiful. And I loved what you ended with. It was just super fantastic. So thank you so much.
I am so grateful. There's no need to thank me. It was a pleasure. It was an honor. And I hope I get to do it again soon. And I am so looking forward to doing the 10th and, doing the Ask the Trainer. I'm sorry you won't be there, but I'm looking forward to meeting new friends and have fun at SIGGRAPH for me, because that is always a treat.
Yep, absolutely. Don't worry, I'm going to take photos, so you will see it. It's like you'll be there.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up now with our final exit, which is, if you don't know who Deborah Wright is by now, where have you been these last 4 weeks? I know I've chimed in a few times, but you definitely want to check out Deborah's artwork because she does amazing work. So go check that out. That's at deborahwright.art. And then, of course, she is also on Instagram, so check that out. I did drop the link earlier into the chat, and it looks like Kyle is doing a bunch of that right now. Thanks, Kyle. Kyle's in the background.
Kyle.
Everybody say hi to Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
So, of course, Maxon One is where all the tools that you need are here. So one-stop shop if you're trying to get started. You also have a student-teacher license, which is cheaper than most meals everywhere in the world. And so how do you know? So you can actually come here to buy, and this is this is US pricing because I'm currently in the US, but just come up to the maxon.net, go to buy student teacher licensing. It is less than most meals, so definitely please check that out. Because if you're in high school, college, you went back to school and you're trying to get going, this is probably the best deal for 3D software. And this is all of Maxon One, all the tools: Redshift, ZBrush, Cinema 4D, Universe, Forger, all of that. It's all there. I couldn't say trap code. That was like blah, blah, blah. So all of that stuff, it's there. So less than a meal, which is crazy sentence. And then, of course, too, Maxon events, we have everything here. So you were just watching week 4, which is the final week of Deborah here for the Demystify series. We do have a series next week talking about UVs and how to approach UVs in our tool set in August. So you're going to want to check that out. We're going to do all the different programs. So we're going to approach it in like Cinema 4D. We're going to be approaching it in ZBrush and some possible workflows combining that, but more kind of demystifying the whole UV series. We also have Maxon Color. So you want to explain color theory, especially exploring the Barbie look. So if you liked Barbie or just saw the commercial and thought the colors are cool, this will be for you. And then, of course, too, VFX and Chill is coming up this August 4th. So you're going to want to check that out. And then Cineversity, where you can learn everything, anything, all the time about Maxon One. Here it is. So you definitely want to check that. And because you listened to me rant on and on and on and on, you probably popped in and said, this guy's talking about something. I don't know what's going on. You get a free t-shirt. You just have to pay for shipping. That's it. So just come in there, grab your free t-shirt. There is a code, which is ZBrush Sculpting. So that is the code to get in here, and then just pay for shipping, get your free shirt. Got to collect them all. And then the ZBrush Summit. ZBrush Summit is here in Los Angeles. It is in person and also online. We have more information that is getting ready to be released to the public. So if you're going to be here in LA, definitely register. It's free. You're going to come in. You're going to hang out with people like me. You're going to be seeing a lot of artists, a lot of big names, presenters, companies coming in, showcasing secrets of the trade and how they do the thing that they do. And it's also a great way to network. I'm going to reemphasize that. It's a great way to network and to meet others who are just like you, trying to build their career and get into it. So definitely show up for that. But if you're online, you're always more than welcome. And don't worry, there's going to be plenty of stuff to do online as well. And then, of course, Deborah today showcased ZBrush Guides brushes because they're just amazing. And Pablo's amazing. And he makes probably some of the world's best brushes for ZBrush. So definitely check them all out because they are here. He also has a bunch of free ones too. So if you're not even sure if these brushes are awesome, they are. You can just pop in there and try some of his free stuff, download them. He has a book. These right here are probably some of the best free brushes I've ever played with. Not even lying.
Shout out to Pablo. Thanks, Pablo. You make good stuff.
100%. So great stuff. But Deborah was using the digital clay pack. So definitely check that out, getting a little bit more look and feel to it. And that is going to be it for today. So again, everyone, thank you so much. And Deborah, any last words? You have the last word. You have the conch. Anything you want to say?
Just thank you. What a good time I've had. And I can't wait to do it again. And I can't wait to see you at the summit, Ian.
It's going to be awesome. All right, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.